Yeah, like that. And then I'm gonna present my screen. Like that. So, welcome to the first Wednesday with MDriven for 2023. The last couple of sessions I've been showing what has been growing slowly, the designing of the web UI while the app is running, and then this is more of the same. We have taken it a bit further and consolidated some of the functions that I think one need when fine-tuning the look and feel of a web application. And I'm very happy about how this is turning out. And of course, whenever you do something like this and move the frontier forward, you see a lot of possibilities and new things that you can add. But we need to pace it and take things in order to make it usable. So I'm very enthusiastic and eager to hear the feedback on once it gets used to see so that we prioritize the right things to do. So I'm going to talk a bit about where we are and what we want to achieve. So I'm just going to use the standard model to show these things, and what has happened from before is that we have a new icon here that calls the turnkey live editor, and this is the view model editor. So they resemble each other, and it's a combination of the run button, which we had from before, where you prototype and start the system in either VPF or in the local turnkey prototyper. So this is sort of a hybrid between the view model editor, where you actually change the definition of the views, and this where you actually run the application. So if I push this one, I always get a corresponding view model connected to it. So this is because they share some of the logic. So if you don't want to see it, you don't need to look at it, but it's there. And this is basically a embedded browser, the new WebView 2, Microsoft's embedded Edge browser, which is replacing the old Internet Explorer and Edge. So what happened there was that they said that, well, there's no connection to the target machine. So what we want to do is to set up a server. So this is something that looks very much as it did in the play button, that we can check if we have a current turnkey core installed. We need one of those, and that we can use. So this is new, and particularly you, Lars, has been asking for the ability to connect it to a MDriven server instead. So this is optional. You can either run it towards a local XML file, or you can use the MDriven server, and that will use the settings from the cloud connection for data.
Sweet.
So, and if you choose that one, this button lights up, and you get to this one where you actually can set the server that you want to run against. But for now, I'm going to use the XML. So what I want to do is to restart the turnkey core, and this new text highlights in red when it discovers that if there is a server running, or the settings from before doesn't match the file that we actually working on. So I'm working on a file that's stored in the internet cache here, so sample model for associations. I'm going to restart the server, and once that is done, I can fold this tab again, and then this one is started with our application. So this is basically just the application in the browser, nothing to it so far. But when we choose to fold down this live edit tab, we get the view model tree and also some of the few of the settings that are interesting per view model column. So when I click something here like this, all things, I can see that this is positioned at position 0x and 0y. And if I were to change this to like 10 instead, this would immediately jump, and I don't have to refresh or anything, and that's the beauty of us running within a harness like this, because we can do the push and refresh for you, so to make things move smoother. And as I've shown before, we can also move things around like this. And since this is the running application, I can expect to find the actions. I can create a new thing and I can save that. And well, it's a small screen, so I'm gonna view one thing.
Hey Hans, if you're editing at the user level like this, most applications, if the user hits Control Z, it'll go backwards a step in their editing. Is that supported?
Yeah, the Z escape, or no, Control C, it's usually copy, isn't it?
No, that's Control C as in cat. Z as in zebra.
Nope, that's not something that we currently have. But and then it's maybe okay. Maybe it's not on screen. There's it's a bit of a challenge catching special characters in web applications. You can, but then you have to catch them all, so to speak. So it's like this: when you right click, you have a menu, but maybe you want to replace that menu. So I don't think that's supported at the moment.
But if the user wanted to roll back their entire transaction, I imagine.
Okay. So you're talking about the normal undo thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I misread you. So the undo is highlighted, and if you undo, that's rolled back. Correct. And there's also a redo if the user wants to undo the undo. That's a redo. Yes. And that behaves pretty much on everything. So if you do undo, and that is in effect until you save, because once you saved, the undo buffer is cleared, and we have made it that way due to it's actually something that we have chosen to avoid conflicts with other users editing the same things. I'm not sure if it's necessary to be so harsh as we are to but currently if you save, the undo redo is cleared, so then it's fixed.
So in the old tool, what I would do if I needed the ability for a user to work in a sandbox, I would create a transient class for them to do their editing, probably have some business logic attached to that, and then upon posting, that would post into the persisted classes.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that that's just part of the view model world. The view model is basically making a generic sandbox for whatever a user, if they were editing a customer file or an invoice or whatever they're editing, that's done in a sandbox that then gets
Correct.
posted when they save.
So that's pretty much all what we prior to view models did with handles and cursor manager handlers to point out which object was current in a hierarchy and things like that. Everything of that type is encapsulated in the view model implementation. And of course you could just as well have done a transient class called view one thing and added these derived attributes, or have them as their own properties, and that would sort of solve the same problem, but this is fewer clicks and less things to maintain.
Yeah, I would think for sort of basic editing of, like user preferences or client name or something like that, you would just use a view model. Yeah. But if you needed functionality attached where maybe there's some quality checking of the data as it's entered or something, then that logic would be built into a transient class to manage what the user's doing.
Yeah, so usually I avoid a transient class as for anything that holds important user data for any for longer than like 2 seconds, because you never know when the user is called away for a call or someone pulls them away from the desktop. So I tend to go with the persistent things, and but what you say I agree with, that it's okay to model a lot of things for the process itself, so not only the result. It's even a good idea to model intermediate information that is needed to actually finish the process. And
especially if the user, if the transaction, if I can call it that, requires updating multiple persisted classes, then you don't want to partially update sometimes.
No. So it and also what we frequently use is state machines to have the whole system watch if this information that is currently available, is it okay to use, or is it in a draft state. So that's very, very common that we have like draft and approved things for complex business things that are moving along a process. And of course you can have as many state machines as you need.
And I have a few throwaway indexes for temporary sorting stuff as intermediate steps, as you said. They are also transient in my UML model. And that's not in the database.
Yeah. So typically where we use transients is when we really want to make one example is when we do reports. We do really complex Excel reports or Word reports, and we want the data structured in a completely different way than and maybe handle a lot of different type of classes, but we still want them to be in the same resulting list. So then we might just harvest data from all over the model and pour it into some kind of print objects that makes up the rows, and then we send that to the report, and then it's easy to manage the report from there, to mix and match things.
That's probably where I first started using transient classes. If you're generating some kind of a management report, pull a lot of data together, do some computations, display it in a grid. But it's transient.
It's very low cost for you as a developer to make the transient persistent. So that's also an option. So even if you think it's transient, you can just as well do it persistent, and then but they are separate. They are not the main data source. They are just steps in a process that will fill in something else later on. The good thing about that is if you have a multi-step wizard with 10 screens to do this, and maybe there's different kinds of objects depending on the choices you make in the first screen, and then it fans out and it turns that they're different if you make choices in the third screen, etc. In the end, you have something that could have taken hours to finish up for the user, and you don't want to force the user to do everything in those hours it takes. Maybe they want to do a bit of it today and a bit of it tomorrow.
Yeah, the downside is that and this is kind of more classic software development that isn't as rigid today, but breaking database normalization rules, basically, because you're storing something twice. I put in Hans as a customer, and maybe I misspell his name. Well, if I'm persisting this report, his name will remain misspelled in that report.
So it's actually, wouldn't say that it violates normalization rules if you have a specific need. Because if you sort of think of it as you do an invoice and you put the address on the invoice and then you want to save the invoice for eternity, you don't want the address to be updated once the customer moves. You want it to be the old address on the old invoice. So then you have to make a copy. So that's a totally valid, because you might think it's the same address, but it isn't. The invoice address is actually not the customer's address. It's the customer address at the time of the invoice. So it's important to discover that even if you think stuff is the same, it's not necessarily the same once you think about it 2 and 3 and 4 times. And also when collecting information, you're actually collecting information and you're not doing the thing. So this is the same as like you do a survey out on town and you have some guy asking you to fill in a paper. Yeah, if you fill in the paper, that's one piece of information, and that's just the order to do something else. Once my name ends up in the resulting system, then I have bought something, or then I'm gonna get something delivered. So this is actually not a breaking of the normalization rule. It's just that I need to separate the order from the delivery. And not every order ends up in a delivery. So, yes, good questions. Feel free to ask me stuff or shoot out so we can discuss.
I can just add, I think, on the initial thing you said, undo and redo. And so I think it's like in-memory transactions. So if anyone would want to expand on that whole scope, of course, they could use CodeRes to access and work more on that. But this is the built-in thing. And I'm a bit surprised, Damien, that I can't even remember how long ago that was there. So, I mean, Hans, haven't we had that like minimum 10 years?
Yeah, so with ECO, you don't have that. That's one of the big differences between ECO and MDriven, and probably ECO and capable objects. So when you're editing data, if you do it the defined way, you're in live real data. If you're looking at persistent classes, you're changing it right now.
Yeah, let's not get stuck on that one. So,
all right.
Moving. So the placing containers, of course, now it shows a warning here that every column should really be in a placing container once you start to use them. And we need to drag them in. A bit of a hassle, but that's okay. So, and these are rendered also in the edit mode. So if I turn off the edit, I see it as it will really be, but turning on the edit mode, everything's a bit shrink, but still you can see how it works. Let's see. And if I were to pick this one and say that this should actually not be a row, it should be a column, I can see how it behaves. And if I pick this one and say that this should actually be allowed to grow, yeah, it will grow in the other direction. So I'm still learning placing containers, but what I would do here is to add a child placing container and move the details grid into that one. And so here we will get a different color on each level of the placing container. So what I probably want to do is to mimic these colors somehow in the view model tree, so help the eye to see where things are a bit easier. So I'm gonna say that this placing container should be allowed to grow. So now this one is taking up all the space. That's good. That was what I wanted. And we can move a whole, let's move something into this just to prove a point. So now that turns out, I'm gonna move that up. So now we have this widget here, and then we have this, and we can grab the whole placing container and move that about in the application as well. Nowhere to move it, but I can add some additional. So if I were to move this one into that one, I missed it. Okay, I don't understand. I'm gonna move this one. Yeah, so if we move, yeah, this is actually by design, but so tricky, so that I forgot. If you move like this, there are two options. Either you want to change their order, or you want to move inside. To move inside, you must actually hold down the control key. So I tricked myself. So now that one moved inside, and you can see that that moved inside here as well. So, and if I take this outer one and hold the control key and move inside, now it won't highlight. I'm gonna move something into this to make it bigger. This blue one, and I want to move it inside. So I don't understand why that doesn't highlight at this point. It should. Anyway, if we can always work in the tree as well. So I'm gonna drag this one and pull that into this one. And then I got multiple levels like this. And if I don't want them, I should be able to move it out. I guess. So that's a good way, and of course we only show a limited set of settings here, and that's what this advanced edit button is for. So you can fold that one down, and then you get the full settings from the view model editor. But I've chosen to make that advanced edit because it takes so much rooms, and we're running the whole application, so it becomes a nuisance if you don't need it. So maybe we can get by just using these. So let me know if there are things that really should be in this part that currently only are available in this part. So there's sort of a we need to think about what to put where, because there's limited space. Also, if you're doing targeting mobile development, there's a checkbox, and this only sort of resizes the screen. It will, once I figure out exactly how, also enable the drag events rather than the what's they called? They're calling us something else, not the pointer events, the other events that are there for mobile phones.
Touch or tap?
Sorry.
Touch, maybe? Or
Yeah,
tap?
yeah, the touch events. Yeah. So we have covered the live edit and the server setup. Now let's head to this assets TK sync, and it has been available with assets for a long time, but they have been a bit hard to work with because you had to read in the wiki on how to do it, and then you had to do it yourself in order to get it to work. And I've always thought that we should be able to do that, give a bit more service to get these working, because I think they are really good. So and this was a good place where they fit in the overall workflow. So when you turn on this, you get the application ensures a assets TK folder, which is named the same as the model that you have with underscore assets TK, because that's the trigger for it to be discovered once we upload the model to the cloud, etc. And this is just basically a file tree where you can F5 it to make sure that you see everything. And then I added these buttons for common things that we put in the assets. So for example, the TK user CSS. So if I click that one and press, I would have expected to, yeah, I got a content folder and I got a TK user CSS. So this one I can just open, and I got a notepad for that. Of course, you can associate this with a better tool like Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, something like that. But what's good is that this can be made to sync and discover changes in this file. What it will do when it syncs is to upload it to the server to make it active for the server immediately. So let's see how that works. I'm going to turn on sync here, and then I'm going to write HTML background yellow. And once I've saved that, my whole application turned yellow. So no matter which screen I'm at, it will have a yellow background. And if I were to change this to purple and save, without doing anything else, this is shown for me. So this is there's quite a lot of things going on to make this happen, but the important thing is that it will be much easier for us to maintain or to see the result of a CSS like this. So that's one type of asset to change the whole application's CSS. But then working from experience, Alex and Dennis, we know that TK user CSS that addresses the whole application isn't always the perfect fit, because quite often when we have a specific UI we want to pinpoint that only and not destroy anything else, and it's really hard when you can't be sure that a view is isolated. So Dennis, you added this view assets thing to make it possible to have sort of a TK user CSS but per view model, and this is also allowing for JavaScript, and this actually checks which view you have active at this point. So I'm going to go into this view, and then I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to press this view assets button, and pressing F5 here I see that I got a view assets folder, and I got a view one thing folder for this view model, and I got these two CSS and JavaScript empty files currently. But I'm gonna sync that one, and I'm gonna open that one, and apparently I'm doomed to edit all my CSS in Notepad. And so this is the view one thing, and this was the TK user, so I can set this one to maybe green. So now this one is green, but this one is still purple. So that's a way to pinpoint a specific view. So of course I'm just doing silly things with background because I don't want to mess up my or disclose my poor CSS abilities to everyone. I'm sure you can figure out how to use this. Like, for example, when to use it. How do you know what to target? Well, this built-in browser is just like any other browser, so you can do inspect, and that you get a the F12 window from the Edge browser, which is pretty good. And here you can do debugging of the JavaScript things that you do, or just find out how do I pinpoint this label. Well, apparently it's on the TK label text. So maybe I want to do that for this view only. When this rule is hit, I want to do background yellow. And then of course it targets all the labels, and if I wanted to target one specific, then I would need to check further things to get this specific one. So that enables you to have full control over a single view, and also full control of the whole application. So I also added a button for the content theme, and a thing like changing the background color might be better to control by the theme rather than the TK user. So the theme is setting variables to affect buttons and the standard background colors that we use for different things. And also there's a thing for the Angular AppWide script includes, but a better one is the X components. So this, I've added a new wiki page, or rather, no, I don't think it's new. Yeah, maybe I forgot to implement that one. But there's a wiki page that describes that there's nowadays a GitHub location where we keep the components. So our ambition is to make it very easy to inject components into your web application and bring you things like, well, let's see if I can quickly find the components. Yeah, good. So it's here, and MDriven components. And what I've put here currently is the board, the Trello board thing, the cards that we did for one project, flipping cards, the chat thing that we did for another. So that's not a chat per se, it's just the visualization of you and someone else. The drag and drop upload, the Google Map, the live poll bars that we did for the demo with the live poll application, and the word cloud for that, the PayPal checkout, the SVG component where it's a template for doing really anything that you want to move around with SVG graphics, and the free GS that we used for the 3D rendering, and the tiny MC and the TK Gantt that is Gantt chart that's in some of the examples. So the ambition is to make further examples building much more complex application utilizing the components. And what I want to do is to sort of practice this to be able, and also really refine the tools so that we can do a complex application for under 10 minutes or 15 minutes and have that as demo cases, because things turn pretty advanced pretty fast if you can combine a Trello board with a Gantt chart, with a Google Map, with a drag drop upload and a 3D viewer. If you can do that with under 15 minutes, I just think it might impress someone to think ahead and actually see what we do for real. Because that's what we miss out a lot of clients today. No one really understands the complexity of doing these things, and because we don't take it all the way and push it in their face. But that would be one way to sort of a goal for 2023 to have that ability for any one of us being able to do an application with at least 2 or 3 components under 15 minutes. Yes, and also I would welcome ideas for future components, because there's lots of things that we sort of could do. And Philip, you have been doing the diagram thing, and I steered you away from using a component, and instead you did with HTML override, and that's fine. But what we want to do is to use some of the established JavaScript libraries for diagrams for a component, so that we can use for other things like Plotly or something like that.
I think we have used some diagram components and heat maps, things that I've done, and bar charts. So we could probably just
Yeah. So
Recruit them into this.
Yeah, just push them into here. And also what I want to do once I get the grasp of everything is to make use of the ability to create snippets in MDriven Designer. So snippets are basically small descriptions of things. And well, I might as well show you. So if you have something like this, and let's see if, yeah, this is how you do it. Snippets, edit snippets. There are no snippets, so I'm gonna create one, and that's called a new snippet. So, and what we can do here is to say that this is a pattern, that we have this view model column. That's a pattern, so I'm gonna paste that one in. So I'm gonna say that it has view model columns, and so now I have that column here, and also that it has this one. That's also part of the pattern. So now this new snippet is, we can use that in another view model. I think maybe we need a column.
Isn't it snippets
further down? All right, I didn't see it. So now a new snippet is available. So if I push that one, it sort of pops up, and I can, if I had defined it to have replacements, I could put in the values here, then I just apply, and then I get those two here. So the aim is for each component to have a snippet file describing what's important for that component, what the naming is in a view model. And having that, if the snippets file is discovered in the component folder, it should immediately be merged to the designer, so that it would be really easy to actually know what data to provide to this component to make it fly. So that's one of the things that dawned on me, that we already have all these things. We just need to tie them together to be able to build a complex application under 15 minutes.
So then the next extension of that then is that this thing will look in GitHub and say, hey, you have these to pick from. And then just boom, put the component and the snippet and everything.
Yeah, so so in the end we will probably, it will be a lot of possibilities.
I'm just going off track here, but it, that seemed to be what you were thinking, but haven't said it yet.
Yeah. So, and the snippets are actually good for your own reoccurring patterns for different things, and snippets are not just for view models, they are also for anything in the model. So, of course, whenever there's a pattern, you think that that's probably a class, and the class should be reused, but that's not always the case. It could be the case, but it's not always the case. So patterns, it's like a structured copy-paste that sort of can help us to reduce reoccurring tasks. And especially for components, it will be super helpful, I think. So that's about the asset TK sync, and I'm really happy about us being able to put that front and center within the MDriven Designer and MDriven Framework Designer, because it wasn't good placed before. Another important aspect is, since the whole application now is running on a server, and we have copied this, for example, TK user CSS to that server, that server has been tainted with this TK user CSS. So if I would run the same server with another model, it would sort of have this TK user CSS. So for that reason, we added the delete asset that actually deletes it from my local spot, but also reaches into the server and deletes it from the server. So that's also really helpful to get this to really have an effect. So if I delete this asset, it will remove the give me a warning that, are you really sure that you want to do that? And I am. And then this one has turned back to white because that file isn't there anymore. So that makes it easier to switch between models and make sure that you see what you really have. And the fourth tab in this, all this is under the button, the turnkey live editor, so I guess that's what we call it, is the debug information. Because yeah, so this is the same debugger that's available from here, but once you run it from if you use the server setup and run it against an MDriven server, then you of course also want to run the debugger against that MDriven server and have access to the same data. And this made it just easier to make sure that the settings are the same for everyone. So all in all, I would say that this whole live edit thing, it's not really a place where you start to design your whole application, because there's sort of hard to get started, but it's a place where you can fine-tune your application and certainly work with the styling and the debugger and definitely with the JavaScript files, because it's really good to use the Chrome debugger to step the JavaScript files to see where you're going wrong. So I think this is a step forward in taking care of the whole process to actually get a finished system. Yeah, and that's pretty much what I had on my mind. Any questions on that? Let's see.
Not from me. It's really interesting to see that it can be used now towards an MDriven server like that, because usually it feels like I have too much data to keep it locally, and now this huge application can also be worked on the design without having to recreate data locally.
Yeah, exactly. So
huge benefit.
So this sort of alludes to the same thing as we had before here, with the ability to get real data from the MDriven server. So this also helps when seeing the model and you're able to pull the real data from the MDriven server, but this one is even stronger in actually showing the data in context and the views, how it was designed. Yeah, and of course, if you run against the MDriven server, you have all the possibilities to break it by changing the model in such a way that you can't that they aren't compatible anymore. but that's something that you need to learn, and to once that happens, you just evolve, and that takes a bit longer than just changing the view model. So, but it's all within 5 seconds. So.
I'm really interested in the JavaScript application for once for the graph I'm building. Maybe not switch it out now, but as a future point to develop, because it is easier to. Well, I find it easier to work with that type of data in a JavaScript model.
Yeah, good. So it will be easy to add the space for having the JavaScript, and also the template HTML for the Angular stuff. And what we want to do is to have good introduction to how to make these components, and it's not at all difficult. It's really doable once you know where to put them and get everything up and play. And I think all these live edit things has really made it much easier to get everything to play, so that you can verify your and dare to get started to change things. Good. So
that's very interesting. Need to try it out to give you more feedback, I guess, because now it's a little bit, when you try it yourself, you'll have more feedback to say.
Yeah.
But how is the syncage between the designer and you can actually, in the browser, you can look at any view.
Yes.
Apart from the design, so there's no hard tie there. As
no. So what happens in the background is that once the MDriven designer sees a turnkey view, it injects a bit of its own script via an API in the browser. So all these drop dots are sort of injected, etc. So the drop dots are like these gray things.
Yeah.
And once we discover what your intention is to move this one, we catch that information and update the designer information. And from that designer information, we re-render a new spans file, an XML file describing the whole view model. And that XML file is then via a new REST API injected into the running turnkey server that discovers that one of its view models should be replaced with another definition. And that in turn invalidates the render cache for that view model, that calls on the renderer on the server side, reconstructing the Angular page. And as the Angular page is reconstructed on the server side, we also send a signal R message to the browser that says that, hey, something happened, you better reload your page. So when the client reloads the page, it gets the new JavaScript or the new Angular rendered page. And there you have it. So it's not a restart of the server, it's just specific view model based operations to and we use all the abilities that we have implemented before, like the being able to tell the client to refresh from the server depending on server events.
okay, I was more thinking if the moving in the web side, could it be aligned with what the view model is shown? So now, if you understand what I mean, if you show view model 1 in the browser side of the application, would then the designer move along?
Yeah, so when I turn on edit and see if I understand question here. So once I flip the side, this updates and also this updates. So
okay, so that's the edit button that makes that happen.
Yeah, so we sort of look at what page we are at and try to follow along with these things.
Okay, for a local while they were out of sync, so I was thinking.
Okay, yeah. So if you want to do heavier changes in the VPF, that's also fine, and doing that would require that you sort of upload it. So now I've done a lot of style changes that are in CSS only. Of course, what I could have done, and maybe in these cases should have done, is to use the styles in model.
Yeah.
So it depends, and certainly if you want to have the styles reflected in VPF as well. Well, good. So I need to think of something else to show you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, this is a lot of new interesting things. So yeah, you had a busy Christmas, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps I can show something in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that would be great.
Who knows?
Good. Well, thank you very much for showing up tonight, and have a good 2 weeks until we meet again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Hans.
Bye.
Bye-bye.